He was the coldest billionaire in the city, until his maid did the unthinkable. Desperate to save her dying 7-year-old daughter, she stole his luxury car and sped to the hospital. Everyone expected him to destroy her life, but what he did next didn't just shock the world, it changed it forever. The mansion at the end of Willow Creek Lane was the kind of place that whispered wealth without ever needing to say a word. Its tall glass windows reflected the morning sun like 1,000 diamonds, and the sound of quiet authority echoed in every corner. Inside, Michael Anderson, a self-made billionaire with a reputation as cold as the steel he built his empire on, was reviewing stock reports at his polished mahogany desk. Down the hallway, however, life looked very different. In the servants' quarters, Naomi Carter, a kind-hearted, middle-aged black maid, tied her apron and tucked a small locket into her pocket. Inside the locket was a photo of her 7-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily wasn't just Naomi's daughter, she was her world. But her world was crumbling fast. Lily had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition that required emergency surgery. Without it, doctors said she wouldn't make it through the week. Naomi had tried everything, selling her jewelry, working extra shifts, begging for help, but the $180,000 cost for the operation was impossible for a maid who barely earned enough to keep the lights on. Naomi had approached Mr. Anderson once, humbly asking for an advance. He hadn't even looked up from his laptop when he said, "I don't run a charity, Naomi. I pay you to clean, not to ask for loans." His words cut deeper than any knife, but Naomi swallowed her pride and thanked him anyway because she needed the job. That night, Naomi sat in her small apartment, holding Lily's frail hand as her daughter's breathing grew weaker. The beeping machines around her were a cruel reminder that time was slipping away. She prayed desperately, silently for a miracle. But miracles didn't come. What did come was an idea so wild it terrified her. In the mansion's driveway sat Michael Anderson's newest purchase, a silver Aston Martin worth more than Naomi could ever dream of earning. Selling it, even for a fraction of its value, would cover Lily's surgery and buy her time. The thought haunted Naomi for 2 days. She argued with herself endlessly. "I can't do this," she'd whisper. But every time Lily cried out in pain, every time she saw her daughter's face grow paler, the fear turned into determination. At 3 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday morning, Naomi slipped into the mansion for her night shift. Her hands shook as she stared at the car keys on the counter. She picked them up, heart pounding, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to no one in particular, gripping the keys tight. Naomi didn't care if it cost her everything, her job, her freedom, her reputation. She had one mission, save her daughter. And by sunrise, the billionaire's car was gone. By the time Michael Anderson's security team noticed the empty spot in the driveway, the sun had barely crept over the horizon. His butler, Raymond, stood nervously by the study door, clutching the morning report like it was a death sentence. "Sir," Raymond began cautiously, "there's been an incident." Michael looked up from his coffee, his jaw tightening. "Incident? The Aston Martin, it's gone." For the first time in years, Michael's calm and calculated expression cracked. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" He stood abruptly, his voice sharp enough to make the butler flinch. Raymond swallowed hard. "We checked the security footage. It was Naomi." Michael froze. Naomi? The maid who had been with his household for nearly 5 years? Quiet, dependable, invisible Naomi? The betrayal hit him like a slap. Without another word, he stormed into his security room and replayed the footage himself. There she was, Naomi Carter, walking into his garage in the dead of night, her hands trembling, her face pale with fear, but her movements deliberate. She wasn't just stealing, she was desperate. "She's finished," Michael muttered coldly. "Call the police. I want her arrested before lunch." But just as the order left his lips, the screen flickered again. He leaned closer. After Naomi drove away, she didn't take the car to a shady dealer or disappear into the night. No, she drove straight to St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Michael narrowed his eyes. Why the hospital? Security couldn't explain, neither could Raymond. And Michael Anderson was not a man who liked mysteries. Within an hour, his black SUV was pulling up to the hospital curb. Inside, chaos reigned. Naomi sat in a hard plastic chair, clutching Lily's tiny hand, her tear-streaked face illuminated by the fluorescent lights. Around her, doctors rushed, shouting medical jargon. They were preparing Lily for emergency surgery. When Michael stepped into the ward, every head turned. Naomi's face went pale as if she'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Anderson," she stammered, her voice cracking. But before she could finish, he cut her off, his voice low and razor-sharp. "You stole from me, Naomi." Naomi's hands trembled, but she didn't let go of her daughter. "I'll go to jail. I'll lose everything, but my little girl will live. That's all that matters." For a moment, the room went silent. The billionaire stared at her, not with anger, but with something else. Something Naomi couldn't name. The hospital room was frozen in stunned silence. Naomi blinked at Michael, her mouth trembling as though she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. The doctor, still holding Lily's chart, hesitated. "Sir, you're agreeing to cover the surgery?" Michael's jaw was tight, but his voice was steady. "I'm not agreeing. I'm ordering you. Do it now." The medical team sprang into action, rushing Lily down the hallway. Naomi stood there, still in shock, her hands covering her mouth. She wanted to thank him, to cry, to scream, but instead she just sank into the nearest chair, her legs giving out beneath her. Michael stood across from her, his expression unreadable. For a man known for his ruthless business deals and heart of stone, this was uncharacteristic. Even Raymond, who had followed him into the hospital, stared like he was seeing a ghost. Finally, Naomi found her voice. Why would you do this after what I did?" Michael didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the surgical doors where Lily had disappeared, then back at Naomi. His eyes, usually so cold, held a glimmer of something she didn't recognize. "I built my entire life believing people only took from you," he said quietly. "But you didn't steal for yourself. You stole because you were out of options and because no one else would help you." Naomi's lip quivered. She wanted to protest, to tell him she still deserved punishment. But before she could speak, he added, "I should call the police, but I won't. Not today." Instead, he sat down beside her. The billionaire who once barked orders from marble floors now sat in a cheap plastic hospital chair, his expensive suit wrinkling against the backrest. Hours passed like minutes. Naomi waited in silent prayer while Michael made phone calls, pulling every string he had to get the best surgeon in the state to perform Lily's procedure. It was surreal, watching this powerful man move heaven and earth for a maid's daughter. But word spread fast. Reporters began gathering outside the hospital. Rumors flew. Why was Michael Anderson, the untouchable billionaire, paying for his maid's child's surgery? By late afternoon, Naomi's phone buzzed nonstop with calls from curious neighbors. Social media exploded with blurry pictures of Michael pacing the hospital corridor, his face unusually tense. Inside the waiting room, Naomi looked at him with cautious gratitude. "Mr. Anderson, I don't know how to thank you." Naomi's chest tightened. In that moment, the ruthless billionaire and the desperate mother shared the same fear, the life of a little girl neither of them could imagine losing. And as the operating room doors finally swung open, everything changed. Because for the first time in his life, Michael Anderson saw not a maid, but a mother who would burn the world down for her child. And instead of calling the police, he did something that left everyone stunned. He turned to the doctor and said, "Whatever she needs, put it on my account." Naomi's knees buckled. She nearly collapsed. But Michael wasn't done yet. The operating room doors creaked open, and the surgeon stepped out, removing his mask. For one agonizing second, Naomi couldn't breathe. Her hands were clenched so tightly together that her knuckles turned white. The doctor gave a small, tired smile. "She's stable. The surgery was a success." Naomi gasped and collapsed into the nearest chair, tears streaming down her face. She didn't care that the waiting room was full of strangers. She didn't care that Michael Anderson, the man she'd once feared more than anyone, was standing just a few feet away. All she cared about was that her baby girl was going to live. Michael didn't speak. He simply placed a hand on Naomi's shoulder, a gesture so unexpected it nearly made her sob harder. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I? I don't know what to say. Michael didn't respond right away. His eyes were fixed on the small window where Lily now lay in recovery, surrounded by machines but breathing steadily. Don't say anything, he finally said, his voice low. Just be there for her. For the first time, Naomi saw something in him she'd never seen before. Humanity. He wasn't the untouchable billionaire with ice in his veins. He was just a man, one who looked like he'd been reminded of something he'd long forgotten. As hours passed, Michael stayed. He didn't leave when the media outside got louder. He didn't leave when his assistant called, begging him to return to the office. He simply sat in that hospital room with Naomi, watching Lily's tiny chest rise and fall. At one point, Naomi glanced at him. You don't have to stay, sir. You've done more than enough. Michael's lips pressed into a thin line. When I was your daughter's age, he said quietly, my father worked so much he never made it to the hospital when I was sick. I promised myself I'd never care about anyone that way because it hurt too much when they let you down. Naomi's heart ached at his words. For the first time, she understood why he'd built those walls. But right there, in that sterile room, one of those walls cracked. Late that night, Lily woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw her mother, a weak smile formed on her tiny face. Mommy! Naomi rushed to her side, kissing her forehead and holding her hand gently. I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere. Lily's gaze shifted past her mother, landing on the tall man standing behind her. Who's that? She whispered, her voice small but curious. Michael froze, caught off guard. Naomi smiled through her tears. That's someone who helped save you. For a brief moment, Michael Anderson, billionaire, feared tycoon, and man of iron, looked away, his jaw tightening, but there was no mistaking it. He was fighting not to cry. The relief in the room was almost tangible, but it didn't last long. Just as Naomi was holding Lily's hand and whispering soothing words, the hospital door burst open. 2 police officers stepped inside, their badges glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. Naomi Carter, one of them asked sternly. Naomi froze, her stomach dropping. Michael's head snapped toward them, his jaw tightening like a predator ready to strike. Yes, Naomi whispered, standing protectively in front of her daughter's bed. You're under arrest for grand theft auto, the officer continued, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Lily's weak voice cracked the tension. Mommy? Her tiny hands clung desperately to Naomi's sleeve. Tears filled Naomi's eyes. She looked at Michael, her heart pounding. Please just give me a minute with her, she begged. Michael stood, stepping forward with a controlled calmness that carried more power than any shout. No, he said sharply, his voice like steel. She's not going anywhere. The officers exchanged glances. Sir, with all due respect. With all due respect, Michael interrupted, his voice deadly quiet but commanding. You're in my hospital. She stole my car, and I'm telling you, I am not pressing charges. The room fell silent. Even Naomi blinked in disbelief. The lead officer frowned. You can't just... I can, Michael said, his tone unyielding. And if you'd like to test me, I have a team of lawyers who'd be delighted to make this the longest, most humiliating case your department has ever seen. Now, leave. The officers hesitated, but one glance at Michael Anderson's unflinching stare was enough. They left without another word. Naomi's legs buckled, and she sank into the chair beside Lily's bed, covering her mouth to stifle a sob. Michael turned to her, his expression unreadable. You're not going to jail, Naomi. Not for saving your child. Her tears fell freely now. Why? Why are you doing this for me? He looked at Lily, who was watching them with big, curious eyes. Then he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly combed hair. Because I realized something tonight, he said softly. For years I thought I was rich, but watching you risk everything for her, I don't think I've ever been poorer. Naomi's breath caught. Michael leaned closer, his voice firm but almost gentle. I've spent my life protecting myself from people, but maybe it's time I did something that mattered. For the first time, Naomi didn't see a billionaire. She saw a man who had been empty for far too long, until now. And in that moment, the line between employer and maid blurred. He wasn't just saving Lily anymore, he was saving himself. The night stretched into morning, and for the first time in years, Michael Anderson didn't think about his businesses, his meetings, or the empire he'd built. He sat in that hospital room, watching over Lily as though she were his own child. Naomi, exhausted but still alert, glanced at him. "You could have walked away," she whispered. "You should have." Michael's gaze stayed fixed on Lily's tiny chest as it rose and fell. "Maybe I should have," he admitted, "but I've spent my life walking away from people. It's the only thing I was good at until tonight." There was a pause, heavy but not uncomfortable. For the first time, Naomi realized that beneath the billionaire's cold exterior was a man who was far lonelier than anyone suspected. When morning came, Michael made a call that stunned everyone. He summoned his legal team, not to bury Naomi in court, but to set up a trust fund in Lily's name. "Sir," his lawyer said over the phone, baffled, "you're transferring $2 million into this account for a maid's daughter?" Michael's voice was sharp. "She's not just a maid. She's a mother who did what I wish someone had done for me. Make it happen." Naomi overheard every word. Her hand covered her mouth, and fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "Mr. Anderson, I can't accept that," she stammered. Michael turned to her, his eyes steady. "You're not accepting it for yourself. You're accepting it for her. Don't argue with me." In that moment, Naomi realized something remarkable. This man, who once seemed like a mountain of pride and ego, was transforming before her very eyes. And just when she thought it couldn't get any more unbelievable, Michael leaned down, placing a gentle hand on Lily's small arm. "You're going to grow up strong," he murmured softly, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "You're going to run and laugh and live, and you're never going to worry about anything again, not while I'm here." Lily, still weak but awake enough to hear him, gave him a tiny smile. "Are you a superhero?" she asked in a frail, innocent voice. Michael's lips twitched into something that looked dangerously close to a smile. "No, kiddo," he replied, his tone warmer than Naomi had ever heard. "Just someone who was late, but trying to make it right." Naomi couldn't stop the sob that escaped her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel helpless. She didn't feel invisible. Michael Anderson, untouchable billionaire, had seen her. He had seen her pain, her desperation, and instead of punishing her, he had rewritten her story. In that moment, everything changed. Not just for Naomi, not just for Lily, but for Michael Anderson, too. The sun poured through the hospital windows, bathing the room in soft golden light. Naomi sat by Lily's bed, her hand gently stroking her daughter's hair. Michael stood near the doorway, silent, his hands tucked into his pockets. For a man who once ruled his world from glass towers and boardrooms, he looked strangely grounded. Lily stirred and opened her eyes. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice still weak but filled with relief. "Are we going home?" Naomi smiled through her tears. "Yes, baby, soon." Michael stepped closer, his polished shoes quiet against the linoleum floor. "Not just home," he said, his tone calm but decisive. "Someplace better." Naomi frowned. "What do you mean?" Michael glanced at her, then at Lily. "I've arranged for you both to move into one of my properties. A safe place, close to the best schools and doctors. No more overdue rent, no more sleepless nights wondering how you'll pay for her medicine." Naomi's eyes widened. "Mr. Anderson, I can't accept—" He raised a hand, stopping her. "This isn't charity, Naomi. Consider it an overdue correction. No mother should have to steal to save her child, not while I have the means to change it." For the first time, Naomi didn't argue. Instead, her chest ached with gratitude so deep it felt almost unbearable. Later that day, Michael accompanied Naomi and Lily out of the hospital. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but Michael shielded them with a quiet authority that silenced the chaos. One reporter shouted, "Mr. Anderson, is it true you're helping your maid and her daughter?" Michael turned, his face calm and unshakable. "Her name is Naomi," he said firmly. "And yes, I'm helping her because she did what any good parent would do. Maybe the rest of us should take notes." The statement went viral within hours. By the evening, social media painted Michael Anderson not as the cold-hearted billionaire everyone knew, but as a man who'd shocked the world with compassion. That night, back at his estate, Naomi stood on the balcony of the guest house he'd given her, holding Lily in her arms. For the first time in years, she wasn't terrified of tomorrow. Michael stood at a distance, watching them quietly. Raymond, his loyal butler, approached him. "Sir," he said softly, "this isn't like you." Michael exhaled, his gaze still fixed on Naomi and Lily. "Maybe," he admitted, "or maybe this is who I was supposed to be all along." Naomi caught his eye and smiled. It wasn't the polite, guarded smile of an employee. It was warm, genuine, and full of gratitude. And in that moment, Michael realized something profound. For all his billions, this feeling was the first thing that had ever made him truly rich. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. Naomi moved into the guest house on Michael's estate, a charming home surrounded by lush gardens where Lily could play without fear. For the first time in years, Naomi woke up without the crushing weight of uncertainty pressing on her chest. Lily's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. She ran through the yard with laughter that carried like music, her tiny feet pounding against the grass. Naomi would often stand on the porch, watching her daughter with tears in her eyes, knowing she had been only a breath away from losing her. And every so often she'd see Michael watching too, quietly, from a distance. The man who had once been feared by boardrooms and envied by Wall Street now spent his evenings standing outside, his phone forgotten in his pocket, simply observing a little girl's laughter as if it were the most valuable thing in the world. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Naomi approached him. "You've done so much for us," she said softly. "I don't know how to repay you." Michael looked at her, his expression calm but thoughtful. "You already have," he replied. Naomi frowned slightly. "How?" He glanced toward Lily, who was chasing fireflies in the garden, her giggles echoing against the walls. "You reminded me what it means to care about someone. I didn't think I needed that, until now." Naomi's heart swelled. For all his wealth, it was clear Michael had been a man living in quiet emptiness. Yet, through an act of desperate courage, she and Lily had given him something money could never buy: purpose. Word of Michael's transformation spread far beyond his mansion. News outlets ran stories about the billionaire who had once been untouchable but had changed the life of a single mother and her child. People debated whether it was charity, redemption, or something deeper. But those who truly knew the story understood the truth. It wasn't about wealth. It was about humanity. Months later, Michael established a foundation in Lily's name. Its mission was simple: to help parents who couldn't afford life-saving medical care for their children. He called it Lily's Light. Standing at the launch ceremony, Michael spoke to a room full of cameras, reporters, and business tycoons. "I used to think power was about how much you could control," he said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "Now I know it's about how much you can give, and I learned that lesson from a woman who stole my car." The crowd laughed, but Naomi, standing in the front row, felt tears sting her eyes. As Michael stepped down from the podium, he caught her gaze. There was no need for words. They both knew what this moment meant. And for the first time in his life, Michael Anderson wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man who finally understood what it meant to be rich. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel to be the part of family, and comment down below which city or country you are watching from. I reply to all. Till next story, take care.